Hey guys, I'll be discussing today chapter 10, in the About Behaviorism book by B.F. Skinner. And the name of the chapter is The Inner World of Motivation and Emotion. So I broke down the chapter into different subsections just so it'll be easier for you guys to follow along. So I first started with the intellectual side of the life of the mind. So Skinner begins the chapter with discussing just how we live in a world and every person experiences the world differently. So everybody has different experiences, but not just only that, but how we perceive the world is different, and how we perceive the structure of the world, how we have different ideas of the world, and how we handle this thing called life and how we just deal with it. And we all also have a different purpose and just intentions and goals within the world and the environment in which we live. And then he goes on to discuss the relationships between three important things, which are the environment in which the behavior occurs, the behavior itself, and the consequences of that behavior. And then he goes on just to discuss briefly some concerns with that I guess came about in psychotherapy, such as an individual's instincts, their needs, and their emotions, and how those things can influence their impulsive actions or their defensive actions as well. On page 164, he discusses the psyche and how it was previously associated with intellect, and now looking at it differently, it's mainly associated with emotional, like an individual's emotional and motivational life, like what things, where their feelings, where their needs, and what motivates them as well. And then he just discusses operant reinforcement in regards to the psyche and how, like I said, our needs, our feelings can lead to satisfaction, to feelings of satisfaction through action within the environment. Okay, so personalities. So Skinner discusses on bottom of page 164 what he defines as self or personality, which should be a repertoire of behavior imparted by an organization set of contingencies. And he just breaks down how we can have a different sense of self in certain environments. So for example, you can have one personality with your family and with your friends who you're more vulnerable with and more comfortable with. And then when you're at work, you can have a totally different personality. He gives the example of a person or their family and that same person in the army as their career. So just think about like how you are, with your family and with your friends, how you're more relaxed maybe, and then at work you're more like professional, and that's two different. You're the same person, but that's two different personalities because you're in two different environments. So with that, he discusses how there can be two selves and they can coexist with or without conflict. And then just some conflicting contingencies would be that, we can have a nice side and a more generous and considerate side, but also be cruel as well. So that can definitely lead to conflicting feelings within the body. And he also noted that it was important to look at what a person was like before the behavior was subjected to the action of that environment, which I thought was very interesting. And the conflicting contingencies are within the behavior, but not within cautiousness as well. And then Skinner discusses human nature, and the best way to look at this would be with evolution. So he talks about how genetics are nothing without being exposed to the environment. So in evolution, species change over time. So with that being said, different species have came and changed, and their different traits have been changed, and different characteristics about them have changed over the course of generations. So that can lead to survival and reinforcement. And it's just important to note how much of an effect or influence that the environment has on our, not only our behaviors, but on us biologically as well. Skinner goes on to just give some background about Freud and his perspective on the three set contingencies, which would be, as I'm pretty sure you guys have heard before, the ego, the superego, and the id. The superego represents how people feel and their interests, and then the ego would be the response to authoritative figures, and the id are it just discusses how, as individuals, we are naturally influenced by reinforcement, whether we are negatively reinforced or positively reinforced. It's a natural thing that human beings can be influenced by a reinforcer. So, life in the psyche. Skinner goes on to discuss life in the psyche and that the mind requires and consumes different energies, and those energies can be looked at as instincts, and we all have different instincts when we're in particular environments and in situations which can influence our behavior, and that reinforcement not only gives behavior direction, but it shapes and maintains its topography. And then within the life of the psyche, it kind of touches more on like the conflicting contingencies and unconsciousness and consciousness. And in the unconsciousness, it is our repressed wishes, our repressed fears and desires. But as behaviorists, they reject the unconsciousness and the conscious mind, and we only look at behaviors that we can measure, that are quantifiable and observable. And then he just touches more on the intrapsychic mind and how memories can evoke memories and influence other memories, and ideas can just build upon each other as well. And how feelings of frustration can produce different behaviors such as aggression, and frustration is generated by extinction. And that's why, for example, if that's a part of a behavior plan, they have an extinction burst as well, because of what behavior it produces. And I also wrote this quote down that I thought was really interesting, that Skinner said on page 170, that the drive to conform prevents a person from knowing his own fears, angers, or sense of hopelessness. But we'll touch on that in the discussion question. And I just wrote down that it's important to note that to identify the contingencies of reinforcement, which account for the activities within the intrapsychic mind, such as memories and ideas and feelings or needs as well. And then Skinner goes on to discuss Freud's defense mechanisms such as repression, conversion, and repression, wishes or impulses are made inaccessible to consciousness. So reading the probability of the behavior and how a person can feel if something is like incapable of fulfillment, and how when feelings are expressed, it can lead to a buildup of that feeling and pressure, which leads to an explosion happening or leads to a behavior occurring. And then conversion just touches on complex social situations that can lead to different feelings as well. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. And then Skinner just discusses the inner causes of behavior and talks about how antecedents are not always clear. And sometimes when an individual is angry, they're not always sure why they're angry. And they just associate their behavior with their feelings, regardless of if they know why or not. And he touches on the inner causes of behavior are attitudes, opinions, traits of character, and philosophies. And he mentions Erik Erikson's 8 psychosocial stages of ego development, which can be defined in terms of feelings from infancy to maturity and death. And he ends the chapter by touching on why we look at inner feelings and not just, or why we should look at inner feelings and not just observe feelings. And then how behaviorists feel that inner causes or inner feelings are useless, and we should only focus on the behaviors that are measurable as well. So that's pretty much the summary of chapter 10. And my discussion question is, after reading chapter 10 and listening to this video, what is your personal definition of self or personality? And do you agree that two selves can coexist without conflict? And lastly, Skinner, 1974, said the drive to conform prevents a person from knowing his own fears, angers, or sense of hopelessness. Do you agree or disagree with this quote? Thanks, guys. Bye.